Thanks, Holly. Great introduction. Appreciate everybody taking some time today. I've been looking forward to making this presentation, partly because I think my jokes are funny, and I'm going to go tell a few of them. We'll see at the end of this whether you think they're funny or in poor taste or otherwise. Also, hope to actually share some, knowledge and expertise. 15 years as the CEO of Online Rewards, building employee rewards and recognition programs. And I sort of feel like I can live and breathe it, and certainly have had a fair exposure to different ways of which companies in the U.S. and internationally have been handling what has now become a very popular topic insofar as how are we driving engagement in our employee populations. So there'll be some serious parts of today, but there'll also be some fun parts because I think this is a fun and interesting topic and can be shared in a manner that lets us take a few stabs at ourselves and the world around us. So I'm going to take us on a bit of a journey today. Nice introduction. Holly, thank you very much. I'd love you to teach my children how to address me because I can barely get a word in at dinner time. And in fact, the fact that I've now got the microphone for an hour will probably satisfy my needs for the time being. An audience warning. There might be a few crude and even perhaps rude words. There'll be some dangerous animals and the occasional creative use of data to emphasize a certain point. We want to acknowledge the excellent work and contributions of some of the thought leaders whose materials I've used and referenced in this educational seminar. Change is a funny thing, and it's funny to watch it happen in organizations or sometimes not happen. Certainly in summary of the presentation, one of the things we're going to ask you to consider is change and where you as an individual fit within the change cycle. I'll leave it for you to determine with this cute illustration as to where you all see yourselves fitting, and certainly some of the situations that certainly we've all been in. To begin with, you've noticed that the accent is not the thick Southern Texas accent, despite I have been a resident of Dallas, Texas for some 20 years. I come from far, far further south, and given the history of the positive relationship between Australia and America and the fact that I'm always made to feel very comfortable in this country, and I get the comment, oh, Australia, it's on my bucket list. I encourage all Americans to go visit. There's a direct flight from Dallas-Fort Worth, and you'll certainly be very comfortable. However, there's a lot of myths about Australians, so I'm going to pass it to Holly, and poll a question to everybody. What is the most dangerous of Australian animals? The funnel web spider, the box jellyfish, the brown snake, or the kangaroo? Right. Those are the results. Are we all there yet, or we need another few more seconds? All right. Oh, I like some of the responses. Obviously, a trick question. Let's give it a 30-second or second or two longer. All right, let's revert back. Thanks for everybody's participation. Somehow folks must know what I'm about to show, which is recently a YouTube video went viral, which maybe you've all seen, with the imagery of an Australian farmer. He's obviously a cattle farmer, and he's got some property because he's got his sheepdogs around. And in the first scene, the kangaroo grabs the sheepdog in a headlock, followed closely by a Mayweather versus the Joey kind of action where the farmer literally comes up and gives the kangaroo a good right hand, and they stare each other down for a few minutes. If you've not actually seen that video on YouTube, that's certainly worth a couple of minutes of entertainment. As it pertains to what is the actual most poisonous animal in Australia, all three of those are deadly. ask me the question of how many people actually get bitten by them, and is it likely that a tourist going to visit is going to come across any of those? The answer is none. Few, if any, are ever bitten by those, and certainly fewer fatalities. But they certainly make for some good TV watching. So to today's topic of putting caffeine in the water cooler as a motivation program, I find it very effective and would highly recommend that if you're not doing that, you consider doing that, or if not, then the signs. But more seriously, I'm going to give you some more practical ideas, things that you can take back internally. The summary of today's presentation is 1. Money isn't the only motivator. It's far from the only motivator. 2, we are not like we used to be. And when I say the we, human beings working in our day-to-day world in 2017. Our frame of reference is forever changed economically, socially, and technologically, and it will never go backwards. Things always tend to move that forward direction. 3, as human beings, particularly working in the modern Western, countries and constructs, the United States, we're highly influenced by our self-esteem. And recognition is potentially the currency for driving self-esteem. 4, as HR professionals and as professionals in general, recognition needs to be treated as a strategic and a tactical priority to drive business outcomes instead of a project that's given to interns as a sort of nice thing to do because nobody else really wants to do the work associated with it, or nobody thinks it's important enough. That's the summary of the presentation. Let's put a little bit more context and history. Firstly, the word has become synonymous with a whole lot of meanings, but certainly the one of HR's big mantra. Let's drive engagement. And that's happening at a board level. It's happening in the press and the media. It's discussed in the prospectus for shareholder meetings. What's the level of engagement of the company? What's the history of the word? Why engagement? In the day when I was young, and all of us may feel likewise, the word engagement was a term referred to, as I explained to my children, I drive engagement. They say, you mean you get married? But, well, no, sort of. Then we joined the workforce and realized, actually, no, this is what they were talking about, which is how do we get the most from people? Of course, you might have some kind of morphed version where you could take a little bit of both humors. But either way, there's a lot of research on it, and there are many charts, and you can look at the charts, and the charts will tell us lots of interesting things, as charts often, tend to do. We could go to Amazon and see that there's a lot of authors who've made a fairly significant amount of money writing books on engagement, in case you weren't sure about what it meant. There's a whole industry that's being created around this great buzzword. Putting it in the context, however, of a commercial outcome, let's use a simple illustration that all of us will probably relate to on a daily basis. Here are 2 brands. We both recognize those brands pretty well. Some of us are shoppers. But the difference between one brand and the other, and amongst other things, is a significant market capitalization difference and about a 18% product difference in the price for what is otherwise pretty well the identical product. That is, if you go and order a latte / cappuccino from one of these brands, the price on average, and it varies where you are and whether you're in an airport, etc. But overall, you've got a price difference of somewhere around 18 to 20%. What's the difference? Well, I would project to all of you and suggest that one of the big differences, we're very comfortable with this more expensive product, and we're comfortable because of the experience that we have when we go to purchase them. The quality of the product in a blind taste test is probably at least similar, right? Fairly similar, discernibly different possibly, but pretty similar. But what certainly is different is the experience that we have when we go into that store and the environment and the interaction that we have with the associate who's serving us. And I'm suggesting that that didn't just happen, but was actually intentional. And that was the vision of the CEO, Howard Schultz, recognizing that it is the experience with the barista and the experience with the associate behind the counter that is fundamental to driving the value proposition of the brand and ultimately the product. And if the brand and the product is ultimately successful, it can yield a 20% difference for the same basic product as we would otherwise get from a store somewhat down the road. So what are our learnings from that becomes the questions, and how do we apply it? Well, as professionals, and probably most of the folks on this call are HR or related, we know that this question of driving engagement is increasingly more important. Organizations, according to Branson, will spend $750 million per year, okay, $750 million, right, or up to 1.53, depending on which data source and what period of time, on trying to drive better engagement by employee populations. So we now know that there are numbers and budgets and a vernacular and an agenda that says we need to drive this as an outcome because we can see the commercial upsides from it, of which, again, Starbucks is a simplistic illustration. So how do you do it? Certain species are wonderfully designed to get maximum engagement out of the gate. They all know what they're supposed to do. They're born inherently with certain functional roles, responsibilities. As they go through their life cycles, they move through separate functions, and I believe the peers inside a hive actually train the others, and though they move and through they move, if only it were to be so simple for us as human beings. We all know it's not quite like that in our workforces. So what are some of the great philosophers and philosophies? I've got the Picard approach, engage. We've been through those interactions and meetings where we're going to have a senior executive at the table who says, we need to engage them, said with emphasis, as if that point will cause the outcome to happen at a more organized and likely fashion than without the emphasis. Another great philosopher and contributor, the Branson Method. Screw it, let's just do it, with a funny sort of giggle and nervous smile at the end of, I don't know how, but whatever, we need to do this thing. And we'll work out the details along the way. Generally, that's the kind of brief and instructions that executive leadership will provide. They know what the outcome is, and they've even decided they're willing to throw resources at it to greater and lesser extents. The question, of course, is, how do you get there? And what are the tactical steps to make that reality a possibility now that it is a known in commercial circles that this outcome is what we actually want? So let's look a bit about the history. Let's go back in time, I think, before we go forward and talk about what we see out there. Let's look at, what was the thinking? Because sometimes this is helpful in making the case and also helpful in perspectives. There's the data. Right? 2009 study on the impact of reward and recognition programs on employee motivation. Okay, good. Direct studies on that. Okay, the study was put together by some professors, Rina and Shakil. Not a statistician, but the summary is there's a statistically significant direct and positive relationship between recognition and work satisfaction and motivation. And if there was a change, or if the recognition accorded to employees were to change, there'd be a change in work motivation and satisfaction. Good. Somebody scientifically did a study on it. I'm glad that we've heard that. But there's a reference point. People are studying this. Let's go back to college days and Mr. Maslow looking at development theories. What's successful and productive. Granted, he was looking at people like Abraham Lincoln, etc., as the inspiration. But I think it's a very relevant and reference point to always look at from a principle standpoint. Like evolution, one can criticize some of the elements of the theory, but what was Maslow talking about? He was saying, in order for us as individuals to achieve the maximum that we can, there are certain fundamentals that we have to have solved for before we may have the luxury of higher thinking. And that is, we have our physical needs, okay, safety, bed, sleep, home, house, food. Safety needs, our environment, our children. After that, we want to feel like we are part of a group and we are a member of a society or a community or a organization that we can contribute to. Having gotten to that level, we've now working for this company, we've got a job, we're good, that's good. The first thing that we then want to do now that we're in the group is work out how to show how we're a little bit better than everybody else. And we're excellent at what we do. So that's the old theory. Why do I raise this again, and not just for the memories of going back to college, but put it in the context of 2017 workplace United States, is the first two levels of the physiological and safety needs for, let's say, millennials, if not for the total population, but given our, almost 50% or 50% of the workplace, they're not thinking about where they need to be living or whether they're going to get food. There's no concept of any of that being in any state of jeopardy. So they're immediately into these higher levels and areas of, well, okay, I want to be a part of this group and community, right? I want to be acknowledged. I want to belong. And having done that, I want to be successful in terms of my self-esteem and feel like I'm a little bit above, or I'm doing a little bit better than everybody, or I'm doing really well. So I want everybody to hold those thoughts and concepts. That is, where are we in today's world? Today's world being, we don't worry about feeding and we don't worry about protection. People have got jobs. Right? Those are not motivators any longer. It's only these top areas, and particularly the top two of joining a group, belonging. Okay, they join a company, and then from there, esteem. Put that into the construct of purely an HR model, and if you haven't seen this diagram, it's a nice element that says, well, how do you sort of translate some of those elements into how does it affect behaviorally how an employee might be thinking and feeling? And I think this says it well. The bottom stage says, I don't like my job and I'm leaving when I can. Stage above says, as many sick days as I can. I don't like my work, really. The one that says belonging, it's like, I'm there, but I'd leave if I had something better to do. Versus importance, esteem, I feel important at work. I feel important at work. I'm an achiever. And of course, at the top, I inspire others to do their best. Maslow wasn't the only great thinker and contributor, of course. Some of you may know Mr. Pink, an author and a speaker. Like all of his work. What are his main points? Point one, pay people enough so they aren't thinking about the money and they're thinking about the work. Pay people enough so they aren't thinking about the money and they're thinking about the work. Okay, well, let's sort of think about that. Firstly, everybody joins a company because the pay seemed reasonable, attractive. The benefits were good, great, and we join. And that's why we joined the company. All of us did. Having joined the company, we then work. How many of us today woke up this morning thinking about their pay? How many did that yesterday, or the day before, or tomorrow? The answer is, if you did, It was probably in the context of a negative, frustrating point. But it's not likely you did. What you did think about was, am I looking forward to going to work? Do I like the people I work with? Do I think I'm contributing? Do I think they appreciate me? Do I want to give my best? So, acknowledging Daniel's point and using it as a foundation for what we're going to talk about of where does recognition sit in all this, is money is not the only motivator. Definitely not. It is an enabler. It's a requirement. If you're a millennial, and going back to Maslow's ideas, well, it's kind of the money that you're getting paid, but it's not really an issue about safety or physiological needs. It's enough to get by. Right? So, is that what we need? Put more money in to inspire people, obviously, according to Daniel? No. 3 factors, he says, the science shows, lead to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I quote, that's quoting him. 3 factors the science shows leads to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Now, he studied MIT people, fine, and Maslow studied Lincoln. Okay, I guess, all of our companies are full of people like Lincoln and MIT students, but we'll put that aside, right? They're certainly looking at who are leaders and why they're leaders, so we understand why they were studies. But the interesting little, almost psychological, I'm not quite sure how to express it best, is the way that Daniel Pink makes the statement is he says 3 factors of science show lead to better performance, and then he quietens, not to mention personal satisfaction, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I cue in almost that, not a faux pas, but what did he mean not to mention personal satisfaction, and then continued on with his sentence, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I'm like, I think there's something in that little segue, personal satisfaction. So I say to you, Michael Levy, if personal satisfaction is a requirement for performance improvement, and we pay people enough that they took the job to work for our company, then the challenge to us all as HR professionals is how do we influence a person's sense of satisfaction? Because that's the requirement before we get to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If we don't have personal satisfaction, then there isn't anything else that matters, because it's just a matter of time. Person's personal sense of satisfaction. So we're like, okay, how do we make people personally satisfied in what they're doing? Can we change their jobs in HR? No. The company does what it does. It makes things. That's what it is. And some people design them and put them in boxes, and some people color them, and some people paint them, and some people build the websites for them, and some people answer customer service. Whatever, they're all doing their job. We can't change their jobs. Some people talk about, well, show career development. Well, yes, we can sort of help that, but we still have to have people doing all the different jobs inside the company. So, yes, that should be considered, but it's hard, to do that. What else could we do to affect somebody's sense of personal satisfaction? I'd propose to you that what we can do is make them at least feel good about the work they're doing. If we make them feel as good as we can, given the work that they do, they are cleaning dishes, they're serving customers, they're serving retailers, they're working as nurses, they're working in manufacturing, they're working in call centers. Right? This is the majority of people we're talking about here. They have jobs that are not by themselves naturally the most amazingly interesting and engaging, or again, depending upon the definition. But either way, we can't really change that. Certainly we can't change it from an HR perspective. That's the job function, and we put people into the role to do the job. But what we can potentially do is influence their sense of satisfaction. And I'm not here saying recognition is the only thing to do that. No, of course not. Right? We're going to do whatever we can to try and increase their sense of satisfaction. But if we influence their sense of personal satisfaction, then we can get outcomes. Then we are more likely to have them stay, that they feel good about their work. If they feel good about their work, again, they'll hopefully do the best that they can. And if they do the best they can, hopefully that improves productivity and performance, and that they're going to stay, and that they're not going to disrupt, and they're not going to talk bad about the job to other people about how boring it is. And I'd suggest to you that if one were to define, well, what's the means by which you can kind of count, somebody's sense of value and satisfaction, I'd probably say recognition. I mean, we do it with our kids, and we're not that different. We're just older forms of the kids. I mean, we still are the same people that we were when we were young, and we like recognition. It's okay. And sometimes trivial recognition is okay too. Strong, solid, more valuable, aligned recognition is better, but we'll take what we can get. So what have we been doing traditionally? I've been doing this 17 years. I've got 400 clients running all sorts of programs, and they all, if not all of them, most of them had something that they were doing in the past. It's not a new concept. So what does the history look like to us? Early recognition. The days of the gold watch. Right? That's where a lot of the history of this started, at least in America, where after a certain number of years of service, you'd be presented with the watch and or take the watch home and be proud in front of the family, and it was a sort of memento. Okay, we're not doing watches anymore. People aren't wearing watches, or if they are, they're certainly a different kind of watch than they used to be, and the symbolism attached to the watch or the symbolic crystal ornament, it's not there anymore. Right? We've moved past that stage. We can't continue to run programs that hark back to the 60s. There isn't anything else that's happening in the workplace that's from the 60s, so why on earth would we continue to do some of those things? Some companies still have some pretty old arcane programs. I think they're missing the populations. Again, not to poo-poo the programs, but there's the history. A lot of plaques and presentations and symbolic, and it's just the difficulty and challenge in execution, which is, this is how millennials might perceive some of those. And it's not just millennials, but the younger populations. We've got to watch carefully how those things are being done, because credibility is key for recognition, and particularly, again, for the millennial populations. Is that credible? Right? They like to make jokes about us older folks in our music and our dresses and our politics and our movies and everything else. So we've got to watch it. Is our plaque symbolic program that we've got an award presentation format still credible? As long as it is, that's okay. But the question's worth asking. I'll pass it back to you, Vanna, for another poll question, just for interest. Why do most companies celebrate milestone awards in 5-year intervals? We're all HR professionals, so we should know this. One, it's counted in 5, so that makes it easy. It was a scientifically proven increment relevant for celebrating employee milestones. The IRS. It was cheaper than doing it every 3 years. Or 4 years seemed too often and 6 years seemed too seldom. What do people think is the reason why we have milestone awards every 5 years? All right. So what have we got? Counting in 5s, 35%, is easy. I would agree. It's easy. Scientifically proven increment relevant for celebrating employee milestones. Scientifically proven. IRS, 14%. It was cheaper than doing it every 3 years. 11%, and 4 years seem too often, 6 years seem too seldom. Counting in fives is easy, scientifically proven. Ivana, will you give us back controls? Sorry, Holly, I hope you're laughing at my little side jokes. Anybody know Ivana? The old Wheel of Fortune girl? Here it is. The answer is it was the IRS. And I like the fact that the IRS has been such a great contributor to the not insignificant investments that all our companies have done, because the IRS is clearly a leader and innovator in HR practices. However, one of the most common, if not ubiquitous, programs run by HR departments in the construct of employee recognition is the 5-year Service Award program. And there it is. It's an IRS tax code statement that allows for the issuance of an award every 5 years. Whew. So there you go. Interesting. The history. There it is. So I've sat at meetings, and there they'll have some representatives from HR. Usually there'll be somebody from benefits and compensation. Maybe there'll be an operations person. Maybe there's an executive there, somebody, from sales. So we're the committee in the group where we're looking at our recognition programs and what we're doing, and we think we're doing a pretty good job here. And, I know you want to come in, make a presentation, and tell us, what's going on. And I said, that's great. Okay, well, I think it's always great to just get an idea together of what's happening, inside the company currently. What's going on. Let's talk about it. You've brought us all together because we're talking about engagement, and recognition's part of it, or sort of rewards, employee benefits. Let's get this committee together. Let's get a group. Let's talk about that. So I say, okay, well, what are we doing at the moment? They say, oh, well, we've got some, safety incentives and some departmental incentives. We've got an awards catalog, milestone program. Somebody says from the benefit, we got a walking program there. Okay. We've got award dinner. Yep. Oh, yep. There we got the award dinner. We've got the biannual awards too. Remember that one? There's a wellness program that they launched a year or two ago. The manager spot awards. Oh, yes, good. Forgot about that one. The service awards program. Yep, that one too. Sales incentives. Yes. We got the employee of the month and the holiday parties. And of course, at that point, the executive sits there going, okay, you got a handbook for all that? Even more interesting has been in some client situations where the HR folks will be going, I didn't know we did that program. We don't have that program. Oh, yes, that's the program that Jenny's got. She's been running that thing for years. Oh, really? I've never seen that kind of stuff. And, of course, that looks ridiculous. How's it supposed to, how's that supposed to work if you're an employee, join the company? As you've joined the company, you're meeting people, you've been anxious, you're onboarding, you've learned the systems, you've worked it out, the benefits program, you're on board with that, you're there, you're sort of trying to fit in. What is there, like a handbook for all this stuff? They studied a handbook to know all these programs that we've got. That's not what an employee needs to see. They need to go, oh, you're spending all this money in an organized and coordinated fashion to show me why I, as an employee, are giving you the most valuable thing I've got in life, which is about 20 to 30 to 40 years of being able to work productively for you, in exchange for which you, as the employer, are doing all these really cool things. And I see how they all fit together to sort of say to me, this is why you joined this retailer or hospital or manufacturer or service provider, whatever the category may be. Because that's the exchange, The exchange is, in this day and age being, it's not like people are desperate for work. It's the construct. They're not desperate for work. They're choosing who they want to work for. They're choosing to give their most valuable resource, a small amount of work time that they have while they're alive, to an employer in exchange for pay, Daniel Pink. Okay, that's why we signed up, but now we're on. And all this other stuff. That's supposed to be, this is a great company, and I feel good about the work that I do, and I want to give the best that I can for them. So we're going to be careful how we execute these things.
It's not just the idea, right, of like, yeah, we should give them a little employee gift periodically. They would like. It's how you do it. Not that you're doing it. It's how you actually execute that. So you'd say, well, okay, they're all good points. Right? You've been doing this for a bit. You've been in a lot of situations with all sorts of different organizations and industries and companies of various sizes. What should we do? Dilbert asks HR, or HR in this case asks Dilbert. So here's some things to consider, assuming that, going back to my first slide, you want to actually take this on. The first and most important question is to say, let's do a program audit. Okay? You don't have to use the word audit. You can find a softer word, but audit's the right word. That is, let's look at, from an employee standpoint, what are all these things we're doing? How are they being done? What kind of money are we spending? And if there's any metrics whatsoever, right? Is it being used a lot? Is it used a little bit? Is there any kind of feedback to what at least can we say about each one of those things? Finance and operations will love you for doing that. Absolutely. This is how they want to know. What? Well, tell us what we're doing, they say. How much money are we spending? What kind of results are we getting? So having actually got a list of these things sort of together, then you got a difficult question. What do people really think about these inside the business? Do they seem like they are old legacy programs that have just been in existence for years, but if we asked a new employee what they think about it, they'd probably go, oh, not me. I couldn't speak to that having any impact on me. Some of it's going to be pretty obvious. Some of it's going to be in the usage data, but the usage data of these various programs can often be affected by, was it a good idea just done badly? Or do people not know about it? One part of the organization. What do we spend on managing this? It's another interesting question. We come across situations where people get a little defensive when we say, well, you're running this program where you run a birthday party event for, the organization. How much time do you spend doing that exactly, approximately? What is this your job? Because I thought you were part of the, X department or Y department, but actually what you're really doing is organizing little birthday parties for everybody, or running around putting things in boxes and wrapping them ribbons and shipping them out to people. Is that what you're doing? So you've got to ask some of those difficult questions. What have we got in place? Do they like it? Do we think it's good? And how much does it cost to run it internally? What's the impact? All right, so you've got a frame of reference. Okay, you've even got a dollar amount there now. Cumulatively, across the organization, these are all the things that we're doing that do not relate to pay and compensation or bonuses. Here are all the other little things that we're doing together, and we're trying to have an impact. The next step is to say, well, let's look at who our audience really is. Let's get some sort of data together that tells us what do they look like. Right? Then, depending on the organization, it's various and different, but it's good to go, what sort of age groups have we got? Gender, maybe a bit of race, nationality. Just get a construct so that there can be a conversation that talks about what does our population, look like, so that when we're asking ourselves questions that say, do we think they'll like it, or is this appropriate, or is it suitable for them, or would this speak to them? There's a construct. But given that we got 50% of the workforce, at least statistically, as millennials, somewhere in the next few years, you probably need to be considering this population in particular and the younger ones. And my main point to share with you on that population is authenticity and creativity. They love things authentic, and they want things to be creative and clever. Right? That gets them going. But America is also changing, as we know. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, this is what it's going to look like in the next 30 years? We move from white population 55 to 40, Hispanic 22 to 31, African American 14 to 13, and the other races underneath. What's the difference? It means that we have to look at things without just a single unified background set of tinted glasses and look at it more holistically. It's going to help you in things like these guys for their call center incentive program developed out of the US with a certain set of glasses. Anybody see anything wrong with this image? It's totally inappropriate. You kind of miss the population so badly you don't even know. So it's good to know who your audience is, by age group, by ethnicity, by the kind of types, because from a recognition standpoint, it's not all the same. People are celebrating different holidays at different times of the year. That's a great thing. That should be positive. People like that. Millennials like to know what the other people are kind of doing and celebrating. Makes them feel educated and part of it. And certainly it avoids terrible faux pas. Social media. What's social media? Doesn't really matter what it is for the purposes of this discussion in HR. Why? Because what does matter is that up to 2 work days per month, or the equivalency people are spending on Facebook, right? What does that mean? They are electronically interacting with other people in building relationships. That's all we care about together. That's what you do on Facebook. You are forming relationships, maintaining relationships, developing relationships, sharing things about you, reading things about others. Were there any of us from generations that are not Facebook, and I'm not a Facebook user, comment on Facebook? It just doesn't matter from HR standpoint. It's what they do. This is what the audience does. And they're not going to change. It's not a fad. They interact, they being employees living in the United States and other countries, are interacting with each other and developing relationships electronically, and those are meaningful. And whether we think they're meaningful enough because we've got some idea or definition of what meaning is that they wouldn't know what meaning is, this just doesn't matter. This is what happens. This is not going away. Right? Our technological framework is forever changed. Some companies say to me, well, they don't have access to the internet. Really? Okay, I'm sure some people don't. It's possible. But 2016, 88% of Americans had access to the internet. 77% of them have a smartphone. Anybody gone to a store and tried to buy a non-smartphone? No one's selling you non-smartphones. So whether it's 12 months out or 24 months or 36 months, they'll all have a smartphone. You know, I've gone into clients, restaurant industry, back-end workers, 100,000 people in the company. Oh, no, they don't. They can't have computer access. Couldn't possibly do the kind of recognition program you're talking about. Can't have computer access. Really? Are you sure? I mean, you know, I don't want to call them out. You sure they don't? Maybe at home they do. Maybe they FaceTime. Maybe they book tickets to travel, visit family. Maybe they go shopping on Amazon. I don't know. Launch the program, 98% utilization on smartphones. Okay. They said, I guess they do. I said, yes, I guess they do too. Don't underestimate that, right? And whatever is going on now, the frame of reference is forever changed, which is more smartphones, more penetration, more utilization, more engagement around that device. You only need to go when you're at your airport next, just look around at the social behavior and the number of next pointed down facing. What are they all looking at? What are we all looking at? There's only so many emails we can check. If we've got something else to do, we'll play solitaire. If it's not, we looked at our little stock portfolio. And if it's not, rest assured, they're social media interacting in some way, shape, or form. I say to clients, they should be interacting in your social media. Not Facebook's. That doesn't help you. Yours, because yours is a cool place to work, and here are reasons. Here are cool things that are happening at work. Here are cool people at work who are doing good things. You could build relationships with some of these people. A lot of spare time, a lot of interest in wanting to have those interactions. And whether you're at an airport or at a bus station or before the movie starts or while you're in the grounds of the baseball stadium, it's all the same. Everybody's heads are down at some point. Who should own this initiative? You could leave it to operations. They'll eventually take control and command of it. But many times I've sat with HR professionals, HR leaders. I want a seat at the table, they say. I want my voice heard. I want to be part of it. I'm saying, what's stopping you? Herein is an area where you can go in and say, I think I can save money and drive a better business result. Let's hear that again. I think I can save money and drive a better business result. Every executive, CFO, COO, and CEO would go, what have you got to say? That's exactly what I need to hear, because that's what I'm being told by my, shareholders and stakeholders. Don't increase expenses, increase performance and results. I say, HR, take ownership. You're in the perfect position to do so. First, what do you got to do? Build the business case. We want to build a positive culture. There's a business case around that. We want to reduce undesirable turnover. Business case around that. We want to improve our KPI metrics in terms of our business outcomes. Business case around that. And we want to establish the company as a preferred place to work so it doesn't cost so much on the talent acquisition side. All four of those will give you a business case. Combining them makes it unstoppable. You can always just reference this data and just hang your hat on the turnover rates. We want to be a great place to work. We want people to work hard. We want them to engage. We want to reduce the turnover. The cost of our turnover is population size, first year salary, times about 15 to 20% of the cost of the turnover equals this. Reduce the turnover rate by X percent, produces this dollar amount. These are not that hard to build a business case. Build a vision. Here's our current state. We don't think it's very good. This is the money that we're spending. We'd like to either reallocate that money or spend a little bit more. Hopefully you can do it by just reallocating the existing funds. Got to build a vision. We want to recognize for performance. Or recognize for good work, big part of the culture. Maybe there's a wellness dimension, well-being, milestones. Maybe there's a training, self-education, idea submission, innovation. Depending on the industry, could be safety. Maybe we want to celebrate our diversity. We want to build a big culture, a good culture. And these program elements are the manifestations of the culture, because the culture comes from two parts. One is, the CEO and how they talk, and the executive committee and how they treat each other, and the historical legacy and all that, and we all know. Everybody who's been at more than one company knows there are inherent differences in the feel of those organizations, and that feel is emanating from somewhere. And a good chunk of the influence is coming from what's been in the past, plus the current sort of leadership and how they're interacting, because how they interact with one flows downhill, and we all know what that is. And there's not much you can do about that, unless you're going to sit down and say, CEO, that's like a personality trait defunct. I mean, I've had my employees, say that to me for quite some time, and I hope I've improved. But when you're in a large organization, that's a more monumental task. And of course, that's very hard to do in a big organization, to have those kind of just, one-on-one interactions with the CEO. But what you can influence is the manifestation of the programs that you are putting together and seeing how they fit together to tell and express a common message. Does the combination of these things say to an employee, we care about you. We want you to be successful here. We want to do the best we can for you as a person, in exchange for which we want you to do the best and greatest effort for us. More often than not, it's that all these different programs that have been created were never created with a common beat. They were created over different periods of time, by different people, with different committees, with different agendas. Fine. We all understand that. It's normal. All of the clients that we deal with are in that state. But you have this opportunity to say, but if we were to redo them all together now, and we wanted them to come across to create a consistent and common message to an employee joining our business or who was part of the business, what would we want that message to say? And therein I say, build a vision. And you'd be surprised how much that can also influence the other aspects of the culture. If you do it well, what does it mean? What's the results of this kind of thing? So, basic case study. One client became the second best benefit, the rewards and recognition program that was put in place. And 80% of those who selected that the recognition program was the second best benefit were also the top performers of the business. In terms of their surveying, assuming that that was a reasonable data point, 27% increase in sense of empowerment, 22% increase in the sense of we work together as a team, 7% increase in their employee engagement. Summary is just to say, these things work. I said I'd give you a summary. 1, money is not the only motivator. It's far from the only motivator. 2, everything's changed. Nothing's changing back. Look at the programs you're doing, and if they look like they were built in the 70s or the 80s, or worse, the 60s, it's time to move on. Just do it. We're highly influenced by self-esteem. It's a huge driver and motivator, and we can tap into it how? Recognition, amongst other things, but recognition done well. 4, people ought to take this seriously. It shouldn't be just fobbed off to a junior employee with something to do, whatever. No, it's a strategic imperative. So I hope I've been helpful and entertaining. The slides are going to be available to you. You're welcome to use those as part of some internal communications if you thought any of their content was appropriate or edited otherwise. But I've appreciated the time that everybody's taken in their day. I would happily answer any questions if people wanted to send me an email after this presentation, or if people wanted to see some examples of, show us what some really well done recognition and reward programs that are aligned look like. And can we talk to some of your customers about their experiences? Happy to do it. But otherwise, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the week. If you're logging in from anywhere south in Texas, we wish you all the best down there. Hope the rains subside. And Louisiana, good luck to you. Holly, I'll pass it back to you. Thanks for today.
And thank you for your presentation, Michael. I've been laughing at the references to Vanna White. I would say that I have some very talented big shoes to fill if that's where I'm going. So we do have one question that we'll get to within just the next minute and a half or so that we have left. So Michael, Jennifer wants to know if there is such a thing as too much recognition.
So contextually, right? So no, there's no damage from too much. Right? What has to be managed is how do we separate the inconsequential recognition from the consequential recognition. And that is, we need to be creating a dimensional construct to employees. Here's things that it's cool to say high five for. Right? Thanks for your help with this. Thanks for the volunteer project. But they're not consequential, but they're ways that people are socially interacting with each other.
and they're doing it through recognition. Okay, we shouldn't mind that because they're building a social network in terms of relationships. Providing it doesn't get in the way of doing business, okay, fair enough. And providing that there can be a clear separation between this is backdrop recognition, stuff happening in the background, and more valued, significant, relevant, important, whatever we call important recognition that's sitting on the top and that's highlighted. So too much, not likely, not unless people are literally just recognizing each other, not doing their jobs, assuming that it's not that bad. Then the important part is the separation and delineation from one type and level of recognition separated from, okay, this is really important recognition and needs to be highlighted.
All right, thanks so much for that answer. And we'll give one more thank you to Michael and everyone at Online Rewards, as well as everyone who took an hour out of their afternoon to hang out with us. We hope you had a good time. So from all of us here at HCI, have a great one.